The Babysitter's Club has been a staple of my very 90s childhood. The Babysitter's Club was written by Anne M. Martin. It's a series of children books chronicling the lives of these middle school girls who start a babysitting club where they babysit kids in their neighborhood. The books were adapted for TV 3 times. The first time was in 1990. I used to binge that series when I was a kid. I was 7 years old, and I always imagined that they would be my babysitters. Then again in 1994, there was a movie which I also watched. It had Rachel Lee Cook and Larissa Oleynik and just people from that time that I grew up watching on television. And then they adapted it a third time this year in 2020 in a 10-episode series on Netflix. And since we're in quarantine with nothing else to do and I felt nostalgic for my childhood, I binge watched all 10 episodes in one day. Then an idea came to me. I should write a sample episode of the Babysitter's Club and try to get myself hired as a writer on the show. Not a bad idea. Only problem is I've never written a sample episode of anything ever. But you know what? It's a first time for everything. So I'm just gonna give it a go and see how it turns out. This is the Babysitter's Club number 16, Jessi's Secret Language. If you're very frugal and you have a library card, you probably borrow a lot of books from the library. I wanted to borrow the book digitally from the library. There was an 8-week wait. 8 weeks! I don't have 8 weeks. I could be dead by then. So I bought the book on Kindle for $3.99. Chapter 1. So basically the premise of this story is that Jessi Ramsey and her family have just moved to Stony Brook because her father got a promotion at his job, but they had to relocate. She met Christy and all the other girls, and they invited her and Mallory to be part of the Babysitter's Club. Jessi and Mallory are 11 years old and the other girls are 13. So there's like, the older girls are in the 8th grade and then Jessi and Mallory are in the 6th grade. My favorite part of this chapter, she says, "My family is black. I know it sounds funny to announce it like that. If we were white, I wouldn't have to because you would probably assume we were white. But when you're a minority, things are different." Girl, ain't that the truth? Anne M. Martin was spitting truths in this book. She wrote some stuff in here that was definitely like, you had a black friend read your book and give you notes, which I give her props for that. Then she says, "But I don't think any of us expected the one bad thing we found in Stony Brook. There are hardly any black families here. We're the only black family in our neighborhood. And I am, get this, the only black kid in the whole entire 6th grade at Stony Brook Middle School. Can you believe it? I can't." Actually, girl, I can believe that. Unfortunately, things have been a little rough for us. I can't tell if some people here really don't like black people or if they just haven't known any, so they're kind of weary of us. But they sure weren't very nice at first. Things are getting better, though. Slowly. Right away, I've gotten a lot of information about Jessi. She has a younger sister, a baby brother, a mom, and a dad. She also loves dance. She does ballet. She mentions a couple of times how she's not really serious about ballet, but I'm going to make her serious about ballet. Since this version of the Babysitter's Club is being adapted for a 2020 audience, she's going to have some ballerina idols to look up to. So I have chosen Misty Copeland and Michaela DePrince. I'm just going to have maybe some posters in her room or maybe some posters in her basement in her little dance studio where she can dance and like look up to them. She goes to a ballet school in Stamford, which is like the next town over from Stony Brook. And she's auditioning for the ballet Capellia. Is it Capellia? Capellia. So she's auditioning for the ballet Capellia, Capelia is this doll that this like dude falls in love with, but he's supposed to get married to this other chick. And she's like, oh, but you're in love with this girl because she thinks the doll is real. But it turns out the doll isn't real. And then eventually the whole mix-up gets fixed. And they get married and they live happily ever after. Blah, blah, blah. I looked up Capelia. And I found out that both Misty Copeland and Michaela DePrince at one point were in the show. That has to be worked into this somehow, so I'm definitely going to put that in. Later on, at a Babysitters Club meeting, Mrs. Braddock calls because she needs a babysitter for her young son, but he is deaf, so she needs somebody who's willing to learn sign language. All the other girls have excuses why they can't do it because it's 2 nights a week. The only available person was, in fact, our girl Jessi here. Jessi loves languages. She talked about being bilingual in the beginning. She talks about how dance is just another language, but you're speaking with your body. So somehow I'll work that into the script as well. I'm going to keep reading. I'll be back with a page of notes and hopefully some kind of plan of attack of how I'm going to write this baby. Let's do it. Say hello to your friends, Babysitters Club. Say hello to the people who care. Nothing's better than friends, Babysitters Club. 'Cause you know that your friends are always there. Say hello to your friends. Okay, I finished the Babysitters Club, number 16, Jessi's Secret Language. It's probably the most wholesome book I've ever read in my adult life. It's just so innocent. They present themes of acceptance and just, all the wonderful stuff that we really need right now in this time. So I took all these notes as I was reading. I've got these, and then I was taking notes on like note paper. So I've got all these notes that I took. In the book, she talks a lot about being Black and how people didn't accept her. I don't know exactly how that's going to work since Marianne is also Black and she hasn't talked about those things. However, Marianne is also a biracial girl, so we can talk about colorism, but they've already cast Anais Lee as Jessi Ramsey. If you look in the past, we have different actresses have portrayed Jessi Ramsey. Nicole Rochelle, who portrayed her in 1990, also very light-skinned. In 1995, it was Zelda Harris, who is the little girl from Spike Lee's Crooklyn movie. And then we have Anais Lee. So we could veer off into the wonderful world of colorism, but I just feel like that's a different video. I think there's some metaphor in there with being Black and being deaf, because there's this point where Jessi and Haley, which is Matt's older sister, they have this conversation where she's talking about how hard it is to have a brother who's deaf and all the challenges that come with it. And the way Jessi relates is talking about how she's Black and sometimes it's hard to fit in because she's Black. I mean, I guess I could put that in, right? Except I feel like it wouldn't make sense because Marianne is also Black, and in previous iterations of the show, Marianne has been a white girl. And so this Black Marianne has not talked about her identity, like, at all. We got a little bit of Claudia's. Claudia has an episode where her grandma almost dies, and then they talk about Japanese internment camps, which I also thought was a really great episode. But we haven't gotten an episode where we talk about, like, being Black. And obviously Marianne is mixed, and she's being raised by her white dad. And I feel like there's a lot to unpack there. And maybe I should be writing a Marianne episode, but I'm going to use this Jessi episode to bring in the Blackness, I guess, since no one's talked about it yet. And I think that's super weird because we only have one Black character on the show, and she's being raised by her white father because her mom died. The next step, since I've read the book, I have 5 pages of notes here on everything that happened. The next step will be for me to make an outline of the episode. So the Babysitters Club episodes are anywhere between 22 and 27 minutes long. The average is about 24 minutes. So I think I might go for a script that's probably about 24 pages. 24 pages would equal 24 minutes. And the way the episodes are broken up, it's 3 acts, and each act is about 8 pages. There's usually an A story, a B story, and then like a little bit of a C story sprinkled in that they tease for the next episode. So let's head over to my whiteboard and see if I can't figure out how to make this baby work. So this is me plotting out the story at my whiteboard. I bought this whiteboard specifically so that I could plot out any kind of story that I wanted to write. One of the hardest parts for me was figuring out what to put into the screenplay and what to cut out. So I cut out anything that we had covered that we already know from the first season. For example, anything about a character or details about their lives. There was details about Christy and about how her mom got remarried, so I left things like that out. There's a couple of different babysitting jobs that some of the other girls do, and I cut those out because each episode usually only focuses on one family and one babysitting job at a time. So I just basically did whatever I could to trim the fat out of the book, and I'm leaving in all the little details that'll make the story more rich, and then changing things here and there that I think would improve the story and just kind of update it, because at the time when the story was written in the 80s were definitely a different time, and now in 2020 present day, we have a lot of other things that have changed over time, especially with the mention of certain ballerinas at that time and just tweaking little things here and there. I would have to say this was a really cool experience. For this being my first time doing this, I rather enjoyed it, and I would very much enjoy doing it again and even getting paid to do it, but we'll save that for a future date. Let's just do a recap of some of the challenges I faced. So if you've watched the Netflix series, The Babysitter's Club, you will notice that for a majority of the episodes 1 through 8, we only have one black character, which is Marianne Spear. She's mixed race, black and white. Her mother died when she was a child, and she's being raised by her white father. I had mentioned earlier how it was really difficult to talk about race with Jessi because we already have a black character on the show who hasn't addressed her racial identity even once. It never gets brought up. It's not a topic of conversation. And all the other characters just act as if they don't see her identity as a mixed race child. So I found it very challenging with Jessi to all of a sudden bring this up, especially because in the books, Jessi is black. She talks about her blackness very openly, and she even describes herself as being a dark cocoa complexion. Now, the actress that they cast is not exactly a dark cocoa complexion girl, and the only person who ever played this part who actually looked the part was Zelda Harris, because she is a dark-skinned black girl. Now, like I said, I didn't want this video to turn into me ranting about colorism and who is or isn't black enough, because that really isn't the point. The point that I'm trying to get across is that we've talked about so many other identities on the show. We get a segment where Janine and Claudia talk about how their grandmother Mimi was in an internment camp, and we get this perspective of a trans child who is getting misgendered at the doctor's office, and Marianne steps in to let the staff know that you're misgendering this child and she is actually a girl, which is all well and good. I'm glad that a show for kids is having those conversations, but why doesn't the only Black character on the show get to talk about her identity? And I don't want to be that guy, but I'm gonna have to be that guy and say this is actually quite problematic. So there's this section in the book where Jessi auditions for a part in the ballet. And at the time when this book was published, I don't think there were very many Black ballerinas. So Jessi auditions and she actually ends up getting the lead role, which is a character called Swanilda. And that part typically went to white women. And there's 2 girls in the class who it isn't explained what they look like, but let's just assume that they are white because Anne M. Martin already said in her book that if she doesn't explicitly say what a character's race is, we're just going to assume the character is white. So Katie Beth and Hillary are kind of like bullies towards Jessi. They call her a teacher's pet, and they say the only reason that she got the part is because she's the newest student and she's the youngest. Well, in my script, I changed that so that they make a comment about her being Black. I didn't want to make this all about race and just talking about Blackness or anti-Blackness or colorism or any of that stuff. But I think that these are important conversations to have, especially when the 2 Black girls who are on the show are both very light-skinned and also they don't address their racial identities at all. Hopefully, the Babysitters Club gets renewed for a 2nd season and they address this, because it doesn't make any sense that Marianne would have no opinions about her racial identity or her white father or her lack of a Black mother or just lack of Black people in her family in general. We haven't met any of Marianne's cousins or anybody on her mom's side, and I just think it would be really important to have that conversation, especially because we are in the height of the Black Lives Matter movement, and all these things that are going on should be incorporated into the show because it's important and it's relevant. And if you're going to adapt this series for a modern audience, then you should be talking about a wide range of topics and not just a narrow few. Yes, it's revolutionary and groundbreaking to be talking about trans identities in a kid's show, and I think that's wonderful and we need more of that, but I just can't ignore the glaring problem that we go 10 full episodes and Marianne doesn't have any opinions on her identity. All we get is, I look like a baby because I wear my hair in pigtails, and I dress like a little kid because I wear overalls, and she wants to remodel her room, and her dad is really strict. All which are great things too, but how about on top of that, we weave in her racial identity? I guess this is the hill that I'm gonna die on. If you would like to read my sample episode of the Babysitters Club, unfortunately, it is a first draft and I do want to continue to polish it. But if you want to read the first page is available on my website. You can read it. You can download it if you would like. The description is in the box below. Thank you so much for coming on this journey with me to writing my first sample episode. I would like to write more sample episodes for more shows, so this is definitely not the last time you're gonna see me. And when I get this episode together, I will upload it to my site and then you can read the entire thing. But for now, I guess I'll see you in the next one. Bye.